Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Proverbs chapter 9 presents to us two women. A woman who is personified by wisdom, who has built her house, who has hewn out her 7 pillars, prepared her food, mixed her wine, set her table, so on and so forth. And then the woman of folly, in verses 13 through 18. Who is boisterous, naive, and knows nothing, sits at the doorway of her house, on a seat by the high places of the city, calling those who pass by, who are making their path straight. Whoever is naive, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks understanding, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. And we have to recognize that each and every day we have these two women, so to speak, metaphorically speaking to us. Wisdom is calling out for us. She's prepared a table for us. She's made adequate provision for us to follow after her. But also folly. The woman of folly is calling out to us as well, wanting us to follow after folly and foolishness and to walk in the opposite direction of wisdom. And it's this woman of folly that I want to focus on today for our devotion. If you compare the woman of folly in chapter 9 with the adulterous woman in chapter 7, there's quite a few similarities, particularly in the consequences that come from both of them. But there's more similarities than that. The fact that they're calling out to the naive, calling out to those who pass by to come in and to induce and to seduce those who are passing by. But then with these consequences that the dead are there, her guests are in the depths of Sheol, really is similar to chapter 7 with the adulterous woman, which says her house is the way to Sheol, descending to the chambers of death. I really believe that this adulterous woman talked about quite often in Proverbs is, yes, a warning to literally not follow after an adulterous woman. That would be a wise thing to do, not to be caught up in the seduction of an adulterous woman and get caught up in that relationship and then have to deal with the jealous husband at the end. But I believe there's also something deeper going on there, and it has to do with this idea of folly. What better way to describe the activities of folly than with an adulterous woman? And if we could just reflect back on yesterday's reading in chapter 7, we can see how this unfolds. There you have the writer of Proverbs talking about a person that he saw that was naive. Again, ties to chapter 9. But he sees a person who's naive. A person who's among the youths, a young man who is lacking sense. And he saw him passing through the street near this adulterous woman's corner. And he took his way to her house. So the first thing we learn about this person in relationship to folly is that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What business did this person have being there in the evening, in the middle of the night, in the darkness, at the street corner of this adulterous woman? He was in the wrong place. And when it comes to folly, typically we are seduced by and taken by folly because we're in the wrong place. And maybe more specifically, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, it could be because we're physically in the wrong place. Maybe we're putting ourselves in places that are unwise. We're really causing ourselves to be more susceptible to temptation because of not being careful in the physical places that we travel to. But it could be also a mental state of mind, just being in the wrong place mentally. We get away from meditating on God's word, dedicating our hearts to the Lord, diligent in prayer, and putting our minds in the right place, setting our mind on the Spirit. We neglect doing that. And so mentally, we're in the wrong place. And that really sets the stage for folly. It gives folly the opportunity to seduce us and to turn us aside from the right way. But we also know that folly seduces. As this adulterous woman seduced this naive person, says she is boisterous and rebellious. She lurks by every corner. So she seizes him and kisses him. And with a brazen face, she says to him, I was due to offer peace offerings. Today I have paid my vows. Therefore I have come out to meet you, to seek your presence earnestly, and I have found you. She's seducing this naive young fella to come with her. She's saying, I'm coming out. I've done everything in preparation for this. Come with me and lay with me. And so she's seducing him. And folly oftentimes seduces us to do the wrong things. Again, probably falls back to us being in the wrong place, either physically or mentally. But because of that, we are seduced to do the wrong things. And folly oftentimes does that. And oftentimes folly does that by offering us pleasurable circumstances. She says, I spread my couch with coverings, with colored linens of Egypt. I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Oftentimes we are lured into folly because we think it's going to bring us into a state of pleasure. And that'll bring us into pleasurable circumstances. And if we are of the naive and those who are not walking circumspectly and really considering our ways, we will just follow it like it's nothing, and we won't even think about it or even think critically about what we're doing. We'll just follow in line with what folly is teaching us to do because we think we're going to enter into pleasurable circumstances. And then folly always offers temporary pleasure. In verse 18, come, let us drink our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with caresses. Usually folly is by nature folly because it's a trade-off for temporary pleasure against permanent displeasure. We trade off the moment for the future. And as we mentioned before, wisdom is making decisions today that we'd be happy with tomorrow. But with folly, it's making decisions today that we're not going to be happy with tomorrow. And a lot of times it's just because of some temporary pleasure that we're seeking after. And then folly gives the illusion of no serious consequences. She says, for my husband, verse 19, is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him. At the full moon, he will come home. So she says, you know what? We can get away with it. My husband's far away. He's not going to be back for a long time. And so it's not going to hurt to indulge in this pleasure. And folly does that oftentimes, especially when you really want to do something, when you really want to follow after folly and you've been seduced. You can really trick yourself into thinking that, well, there won't really be any serious consequences. There will be no harm. I can get away with it. No big deal. And further we go into folly. And then folly is followed ignorantly. It says in verse 22, suddenly he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as one in fetters to the discipline of a fool. And you can think of an ox going to the slaughter, just thinks it's a regular day, doesn't think anything of it, don't think there's any danger around. But all the while, the ox is being led to be slaughtered and to be killed. And the naive and those who follow after folly, who think that it's going to lead to pleasure, it's going to lead to no real serious consequences, are all the while just marching their way to death and marching their way to really serious consequences, which leads us to the last thing that we're taught about folly in this chapter, and it leads to serious consequences. Verse 23, until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare, so he does not know it will cost him his life. And then verse 27, her house is the way to Sheol, descending to the chambers of death. Talking about this adulterous woman. But the same thing is true with folly. The more and more we follow after folly, the more and more we follow after foolishness. We're just getting... just trying to get instant gratification, immediate pleasure and forsaking the future and making wise decisions in connection to the future, eventually it's going to lead to some very serious consequences, and maybe even death in some circumstances. So as we read today in chapter 9 about this woman of folly, we can also think about the adulterous woman in chapter 7 and learn a lot about folly in connection to that. Folly usually is derived from us being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Folly always seduces us. Folly often offers pleasurable circumstances, offers temporary pleasure, gives the illusion of no serious consequences, is followed ignorantly when we are naive about what it's doing, and then it leads to serious consequences. So these are some warning signs that we can look for in our lives. If we see ourselves being seduced by folly, we can shake ourselves loose of that. And remember Proverbs chapter 9, also in connection to chapter 7, and realize that that's not the path we want to take. We want to take the path of wisdom. And that in and of itself would be a different devotion to show why we should desire wisdom and why we should seek after the way of wisdom. And maybe we'll have time to talk about that in future devotions. So with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.